Hello beautiful people and welcome to another video. In this one I'll be working on this 1936 Art Deco drinks cabinet. And before you ask, the little leopard that you can see in the background, that's my new shop assistant and his name is Mando. He's a Bengal and unlike the other cats you've seen, this one is actually mine. This leg is broken and I'll need to reglue this and take the screw out and redo it. Other than the broken leg, there wasn't anything structurally wrong with this cabinet, but it just looked really tired and old and it needed a proper makeover. I really like Art Deco era, and whether it's jewelry or cars or furniture that was made at that time, I just think it was super cool. I've worked on several pieces similar to this one, and the problem is that you never know what's underneath this varnish because this is basically tinted lacquer, so it was used to cover all sorts of imperfections and scratches, so you never really know what you're getting into until you take it off. In order to remove the doors, I had to unglue those little pieces that were attached to the hinges because there was no other way of getting the doors out. And I don't know if you remember, but I did a similar piece a while back and lots of you commented that the legs were probably not original, and this is just an example that they probably were because they're almost the same. Whoever put those handles on, they used screws and glue, but fortunately they came off without any issues with the veneer. There was a lot of old glue left, so before I could repair the leg I had to scrape it off, but Mando said that he would help me with that. He's such a good boy, isn't he? Well, I guess it's the thought that counts. This is the piece that broke, so it was a pretty simple fix. I just put some glue in and clamped it together. And before anyone says anything in the comments, if I'm working with any chemicals or anything that's harmful to a cat, obviously he's not around, so don't worry about it, I'm responsible. For the repair I used hide glue, which is the glue that was used originally. I clamped it and I left it to dry. At this point, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do about the color of this cupboard, but I decided that the legs and the underside of it will be the color that it is. I'm just going to refresh it a bit. As you can see, the other leg needed regluing as well because the glue was completely dry. I don't know if you remember, but this was a piece of trim that's on both sides of the cupboard, and this covers a little gap that you can see when you open those side doors, and this was cracked, so I just reglued it. And now I just need to remove the varnish from this entire thing.
2,000 years later. One eternity later.
I don't know what this is, but it looked like it was chewed by an animal, so I'll have to fix it later. There were lots of dings and dents in the top and many other places, so I used my steamer hoping that this would raise the grain and allow me to sand it flat and fix it this way. As it's usually the case, most of this is made with plywood or some sort of cheaper wood covered with veneer, and these doors, they're very flexible, so scraping wasn't really an option because the scraper would just dig into the veneer and I didn't want to damage it, so I decided to use stripper on the doors. And fortunately it worked quite well. And this is what I was afraid of. These scratches are very deep and this veneer is very thin and old. And this is not something that happened during the use of this furniture. This is factory issue. They basically covered these with the tinted lacquer. So after taking the varnish off, I used hydrogen peroxide, oxalic acid, as well as my steamer to raise the grain and to bleach the veneer. But even though I was able to remove most of the scratches, I just wasn't happy with the way the veneer looked. And here's the problem when you work with old furniture. Most of it is veneer, and you can actually see the difference because this curved piece on this door is actually solid oak, but the rest of it is veneer and it's got slightly different color. And because it's really thick, you can bleach it, you can sand it, you can do all sorts of things with it to make it look great. But because the veneer is very thin and often the stain goes right through the veneer, if the bleaching and all the chemicals that you use don't work, you can't really do much, because if you sand too much, you'll just sand through the veneer. And sometimes the only way to fix the repair is to try and recreate the colors and the pattern with paints or stains, but I can't paint, so it's very difficult for me to do that. Because I scraped the top, there is a lot of varnish left in the grain of this oak veneer, and this is often a problem when you work with oak veneer or oak wood in general. So I use some stripper to hopefully dissolve this and try to wipe it off. I use mineral spirit and steel wool to remove the residue from the paint stripper. As I mentioned, this was a proper Art Deco from 1936, and this is the label to prove it. And because I was going to refresh the back, I wanted to preserve this label, so I sprayed it with clear lacquer. Before I did anything else, I gave this cupboard a good clean. This was actually something that one of you guys sent to me, and this is an ultrasonic cleaner for jewelry and metal bits. So I decided to try it out, and I used some vinegar instead of water, and I put all the hardware in it. When you work with old veneer, you can clean it as much as you want, you can sand it, but it's still gonna have this old veneer look, so I used some hydrogen peroxide as well as oxalic acid to try and revive it and make it look a bit newer. As far as the drawers, as you can see, they were a bit beat up, but nothing too dramatic, so I just gave them a good clean with mineral spirit and used some lacquer toner to refresh the color and to make them look nice. I also did the same for all those little shelves inside this cupboard, but that's after a shortcut break. These are just those little blocks that were attached to the hinges, so I cleaned them up. One of the drawers had that green felt thing that I had to remove because it wasn't good enough to keep it or to restore it. So I used my steamer to get it off and I replaced it. I think they used construction grade adhesive for this because it was a royal pain to get it off. And as I mentioned, I used lacquer toner to refresh the drawers because they were not bad enough to sand the whole thing off and restain it. And this is also an easier way to match the color on all the bits that are the same color. After all the sanding and bleaching and all those chemicals, I was almost happy with the way the top looked and all those solid bits, but there were still two areas on the top that didn't look great. Now let's take care of this chewed up piece. And whatever this actually was, it was bad enough so I couldn't just sand it, I had to replace that piece of wood. And this was in a very awkward place, so it wasn't very straightforward how to place my router to cut it out, but I found a way. And this is a little attachment that I think I bought like 2 years ago and I've never used it until now. And fortunately, I remember that I had it because it was just perfect for this job. It basically allowed me to put my router in it and use this guide rail to make sure that the cut was perfectly straight and exactly where I needed it to be. By the way, you might be seeing some tools that I reviewed in my recent video, and this is not a sponsored video, but if you like these clamps, for example, or some other things that I'm using in this video, I'll put the links in the description. I found this oak trim from an old project that I did a while back, so I used it to cut a piece of wood that was exactly the same shape as this cutout that I just made with my router, and I just glued it in place. If you're still watching this video, I hope you're enjoying it, and thank you, because this makes the algorithm think that you like this video and it will probably recommend it to other people like you. And I also wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you wonderful people for liking, commenting, and watching my videos as always, and especially my channel members. You guys are amazing. And if you'd like to help and keep the lights on in the shop, you can find the links in the description to support my channel. You can buy me a coffee via Buy Me a Coffee, hit the super thanks button, or visit my Amazon wishlist link. Thank you. When the glue was dry, I used my block plane thingy to finish this off and make it nice and smooth. And when I was done with that, as you can see, this glued in piece of wood is a bit too long, so I just used my router with a flash trim bit to cut it to size. And just like that, it's all nice. And just like I did with the drawers and all those little shelves, I taped off the sanded bits and I used lacquer toner for the inside. I also used it on the bottom because it just looked a bit rough. The back didn't look great, so I used mineral spirit to clean it, and then I used some tinted hard wax oil to refresh it a bit. I also used my portable laser to engrave my logo. So this was my first idea. I basically used hard wax oil. This is transparent, that's slightly tinted white, and because this veneer didn't look great, and I think it looks better in video than it looked in person, I was hoping that this would even out the tone and just make it look natural and nice, but I just didn't like it. So I decided to wipe it off with mineral spirit, and I matched the color of the bottom of this cupboard. And yes, I know I'll get lots of comments that you were hoping that this would be natural and all that, and a lot of it will be, but I basically saved the bits that look good enough to keep them natural, and the bits that didn't, I just did the best that I could. As you can see, I taped off all those decorative bits because this is solid oak and I was able to clean it up really nice, but the rest of it will basically be the original color because this is kind of what it looked like. And don't worry, because there is still plenty of natural looking wood. I'm just trying to explain why I did what I did, because there are always people who moan about me using stain, and sometimes I think people don't understand that there's just not much else I can do. And I know that some people will say that I'm a magician, but I'm not, and there's just some things that I can't fix. And obviously I could just replace this veneer, but then it would look new, and that wouldn't make certain people happy either. So, you know, you just can't win. After about half an hour, I wiped off the excess oil, and as you can see, there's still some areas that just don't look great, so I tried to fix them as best as I could. Like I mentioned, this veneer was very thin, so I've done everything I possibly could, and now I'm just trying to use some lacquer toner and only cover those dark bits. So this ultrasonic cleaner thing, it didn't do much, and I left the hardware in the vinegar for a long time, so it looked much better, but was definitely not clean, and I had to do most of the cleaning by hand. Most of the hardware was brass, so that was pretty straightforward as far as cleaning, and I sprayed the screws with WD-40 to make sure they wouldn't rust. I finished cleaning all the other bits and I put the whole thing back together. I also used Never Dull because this prevents the brass from tarnishing. When the lacquer toner was dry, I used Oris oil on the decorative bits and on the handles, and on the rest of the doors I used Osmo. And this Osmo oil is just satin and it doesn't have any tinter in it. I know it looks white, but trust me, there's no tinter and this dries completely clear. This has been a very interesting project and I quite enjoyed working on it. I'm curious to know what you guys think about the colors and if you like it. Because the handles are part of the decorative design on the doors, I had to strip the varnish off and make them match the rest of it. If you've seen my MCM challenge that I did with a bunch of other YouTubers and you can't wait for the next one, you'll be happy to know that there is one coming up on the 28th of April, and this one will be a restoration challenge, and the list of everyone participating will be announced soon, but this is very exciting and you guys stay tuned. With the handles, I simply followed the same steps as I took with everything else, and when they were ready, I put them back on the doors. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed this project. Please let me know in the comments what you think about it, and if you enjoyed it, give me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next video.